I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
Will today's students be tomorrow's priests and nuns?
Maybe this isn't for me, but maybe something else is. And that's what I'm trying to find out.
Brooklyn's bishop looks back on 40 years of priesthood.
You do remember when you're prostrate on the floor of the cathedral, and that's when all the thoughts go through your mind.
And he gives us his eyewitness.
To be a priest in today's world is no different than it's been over the centuries. The priest's job is to bring people to God.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. So, what's your calling? Well, most people might answer that question by maybe talking about their jobs, but for others, the answer isn't about an occupation, it's about a vocation. And tonight, we're going to take a close look at one type of vocation, the vocation of the priesthood and religious life.
We're going to start by meeting some young people looking for answers. These young people had the chance to learn more about the priesthood and other religious vocations at a vocations fair at Our Lady of Hope in Middle Village, Queens. And they also had the chance to hear about vocations from a rather notable priest, Brooklyn's very own Bishop DiMarzio.
Today in our church, we need many more young people to consider vocations to the priesthood and religious life. And if a young person today might think they have a vocation, don't dismiss it. Pray about it. First, you must pray. And then ask others to pray for you and with you, that you can truly discern if God is calling you.
The Lord told us that the harvest is great and the laborers are few. Those are Jesus' words himself. Vocations are always important. At a time when we have less vocations, it's even more important to pray for vocations. And it was a wonderful opportunity today in this parish that they've organized this Vocation Awareness Day. The children, they were dressed as angels, saints. It's an inspiration to see, again, witnesses to the faith and those who have given their lives completely to God. So this is a wonderful day.
Well, I love teaching in this school. So when I go in and I teach them, and many times they will ask a lot of interesting questions, which will then lead to what priests are about, and that helps.
It was the whole experience at my high school that really helped me out, and because they brought up the vocation, they introduced me to it. They introduced me to the idea. I decided maybe this isn't for me, but maybe something else is, and that's what I'm trying to find out.
St. Francis loves animals, and I like animals too, so it's kind of cool, but I don't know. Well, I want to help people, but I really want to get married someday.
Back in the days when they had the high school seminaries, oftentimes it was a sister or something that might have put in the child's mind and heart that perhaps they may have a religious vocation, and strongly encourage them to do so and to follow that.
I go to this school, Our Lady of Hope. We did essays and posters for the vocation fair, and I wrote an essay myself about different vocations and how they're used today in the world, and how they inspire different people today. My mother's friend, Sue Frame, she's a missionary, and she went to the Solomon Islands. I probably will be talking to my mom's friend, and then I'll learn more from her, and I'll tell her, and she'll tell me from her point of view.
These days, I find that when folks respond to a religious vocation or calling, it's much more rooted and grounded in who they are, and a deep prayer life or spirituality, or a desire to really love and serve God and to give back for all the many graces and blessings that they have been given.
Well, we will have much more on vocations later in the show, including Bishop DiMarzio reflecting on his own vocation.
But when we return, we'll have the day's headlines, including good news or bad news. We'll get the latest monthly employment numbers. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up later, Brooklyn's bishop talks about his personal journey and his calling to the priesthood.
But first, let's turn to the day's headlines. A mixed bag of unemployment news today. The nationwide unemployment rate remained steady for July at 9.5%, even though the economy lost 131,000 jobs. Most of the losses were temporary census workers and other government employees. The private sector actually added jobs, 71,000 jobs last month. As the economy continues to struggle, New Yorkers can find some help through Catholic Charities at Brooklyn and Queens. For more information, you just log on to our website, currentsny.net. Elena Kagan is headed for a seat on the Supreme Court. The Senate approved the U.S. Solicitor General as the newest Supreme Court justice by a vote of 63 to 37. Kagan will be the fourth New Yorker on the current court, and she also changes the religious makeup of the panel. Kagan, who is Jewish, replaces retired Justice John Paul Stevens, the court's only Protestant. She also becomes the fourth female Supreme Court justice in the nation's history. Last night, President Obama spoke about the significance of the confirmation.
And I'm proud also of the history we're making with her appointment. For nearly 2 centuries, there wasn't a single woman on our nation's highest court. When Elena takes her seat on that bench, for the first time in our history, there will be 3 women. It is, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently stated, one of the most exhilarating developments, a sign of progress that I relish not just as a father who wants limitless possibilities for my 2 daughters, but as an American proud that our Supreme Court will be more inclusive, more representative, and more reflective of us as a people than ever before.
Well, pro-life leaders expressed disappointment following the confirmation vote. The head of the group Americans United for Life said Kagan would prove to be one of the court's most, quote, agenda-driven pro-abortion justices. Chief Justice John Roberts will swear in Kagan on Saturday afternoon. A new poll shows 3 out of 5 New Yorkers oppose construction of a controversial Islamic community center and mosque near Ground Zero. The survey by Siena College Research Institute shows just 26% of New York residents support the Cordoba House, which is planned for a site 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. Meantime, some supporters rallied at the site of the proposed center on Thursday. Leaders from the city's Jewish community gathered to express their solidarity with the developers. The rally was organized by the Shalom Center. Organizers say the Cordoba House would promote healing and encourage love and respect among people of all faiths. A vote by the City Landmarks Commission earlier this week cleared the way for the center to be built. Well, today is the 65th anniversary of the atomic bomb attack on Hiroshima, Japan, and the World Council of Churches used the occasion to renew its call for a world free of nuclear weapons. The WCC General Secretary said governments should find a new resolve to protect the sanctity of life. Earlier this year, President Obama issued a similar call and entered into an agreement with Russia for both countries to reduce their nuclear stockpiles. This was the first year the United States was represented at a commemoration ceremony in Hiroshima.
In Africa, Kenyan voters approved a new constitution earlier this week, but the country's Catholic bishops say they are not happy with the outcome. In a statement released yesterday, the bishops called the document flawed and said some aspects of it need to be changed. Concerns over the new constitution include the possibility that it would legalize abortion and establish Islamic courts in Kenya. The bishops called on Kenyans to pray for a good constitution. Bishops in England and Wales will share an historic moment with Pope Benedict when the pontiff visits the United Kingdom next month. When the Pope visits St. Mary's College at the end of his trip, reports say he will pose with bishops for a photograph that will recreate a historic painting. The painting depicts a meeting between Pope Pius IX, Cardinal John Henry Newman, and other church leaders after the Catholic hierarchy in Britain was restored in 1850. Pope Benedict will beatify Cardinal Newman during his visit to the UK. And finally, another revered Catholic on the path to sainthood is the subject of a commemorative edition of Time magazine, which hit shelves today. Mother Teresa, the life and works of a modern saint, takes a look at the life and founder of the Missionaries of Charity just in time for her 100th birthday. Recently, I spoke with one of the book's authors, David Van Bema. David, thank you so much for joining us today. You brought with you for us a copy of your new book on Mother Teresa.
That's correct. Thank you for having me.
Wanted to ask you, what drew you to writing about her at this time?
Well, a few years ago, I was a writer at Time magazine. I was the religion writer there, and I wrote a cover story about the letters that had come out in 2007 that described her very long, dark night of the soul that really lasted 49 years. And I found it to be a really rich story, and I found her to be a much richer figure than I had ever known. And I got interested. I said, well, how about doing the rest of her? And that kind of led to this.
And what is this? What is unique about this particular book as opposed to some of the others that have been written about her in the past?
Well, I think it's unique in that it's it's accurate, some are not. It really is a wonderful primer. It could be used both for adults and for older children about her life without having to read the 350 pages of the biographies that are also very accurate.
Sure.
In addition to having beautiful, beautiful pictures, which I understand there aren't that many.
What do you think people will get out of this? Because it's sort of like when people say, you know, oh, they're like Mother Teresa, or she's, you know, a saint, or, you know, they sort of have this in their common speak of every day. What might they not know that they would discover about her in this?
Well, I think they'll see her in full, really. I think that one of the things that happened, because it was so peculiar when she passed on, she died at the same time that Lady Diana died, you may remember. And then this book came out that talked about the darker side of her life, and nobody really sort of had time to sort of pull it together and really look at the life. And this really presents her as a person of remarkable consistency, not somebody where God took somebody who was sort of inappropriate, but through his grace sort of flipped a switch, but somebody where the circuitry was sort of, he had already put in place. And because she came from a family that actually in some ways prepared her for what would come next, and then takes her through her biography, and then through the growth of her order, the creation of her order, the growth of her order, and then her post-biography, because she has had this, not only the cause, which our last chapter is about, it's written by her postulator, but also we do deal with the Dark Knight stuff, which came out after her death. So it's really sort of a panoramic view of her life, but not in a really intimidating way.
All right, well, David, that is all we have time for today. However, you can find this at your local bookstore starting today. Thanks so much for being here on Currents.
Thanks for having me.
Birthday's August 26th. She'd be 100 years old.
That's right, and of course a lot of controversy surrounding that day as well here in New York City, with the Empire State Building refusing to light up in her honor, but Brooklyn Borough Hall will be lighting up, shining blue and white lights on Brooklyn Borough Hall there, and also the bridge upstate that we had talked about yesterday over the Niagara River. So it's, you know, she's going to be honored. Definitely going to be honored.
She will, and there's more about that book over on our blog, Riding the Wave.
Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up.
Just ahead, we go into the deep with Bishop DiMarzio to hear about his 40 years as a priest.
I've never had an unhappy day. I've had difficult days in 40 years, but not an unhappy day.
Welcome back. 40 years. That's 4 decades. And by anyone's account, 40 years is a long time to see significant amounts of change. Lots of things can change, including the church, which looked a lot different back in 1970.
Yeah, indeed. Paul VI was Pope. Mass attendance was still high, and in the U.S., just over 800 young men were ordained to the priesthood. That's nearly double the number of young men who were ordained this year. One of those men ordained back in that year would go on to become the Bishop of Brooklyn.
Sure would. As we continue our look at vocations tonight, we go into the deep with that very man, Bishop DiMarzio, as he looks back on 40 years as a priest. Bishop DiMarzio, thank you so much again for joining us on Currents today.
Good to be here.
We enjoyed these Into the Deep segments. And today we're talking a little bit about your ordination. We're going back 40 years ago. Talk to us a little bit about what that day was like for you.
Well, you remember it because it is one of those highlights in your life, day of ordination, day of marriage, major events in somebody's lifetime. And I was 25 years old, wasn't 26 yet, almost 26, and it's a long time. And it's very memorable because you really are moved. You're preparing for so many years for the day, and you come with your classmates. We were 28, I think, that were ordained that day, a large group, and there's a lot of nice memories of what happened in the interaction between us. We were at the seminary, it took us down by bus to the cathedral right there, and the words of the bishop was rather elderly at that time, having a lot of trouble reading even. So you remember that. But sure. Overall, I think you do remember when you're prostrate on the floor of the cathedral. That's when all the thoughts go through your mind. You know, this is what I'm being called to, and
don't know what's ahead of you. So there are a lot of good memories.
Well, looking back on those memories, what in particular may stand out for you as some of the most significant experiences that you've had?
Well, I think serving people is clearly, that's why you become a priest. You want to serve God and his people. You want to serve the church. And just some of the things that have happened over the years. I got an email the other day, totally unexpected. I went to the diocesan site from somebody who I knew right in the first couple of years. It was an immigrant, came with his parents from Italy, and now he's returned to Italy, working for the U.S. government at the Navy base in Naples. And he found my name, I guess, through the internet, and just wrote a nice note, says, thank you for what you did for me when I came for my family. Well, that was it's kind of affirmation that you work with people, and we had a mass in Italian and different things. So those are nice things, and you do remember, I think, how you touch people's lives in so many different ways. So I think that's the
human connection.
The human connection, and that's the satisfaction of the priesthood, that you really are able to touch people when they need it.
Right. And what, over these last 4 decades, have you noticed has changed within the church?
Well, I was ordained just as the Vatican Council was concluded, so there were many changes in the liturgy and the way we approach the church, of how we look at the role of the laity, which is much improved. There's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of difficult issues, too, that we faced. Less people coming to Mass, less children in our schools. There's been, over these years, a sense of loss in many areas. While at the same time, there's a renewed, I think, commitment to really teaching the faith as not something that's just cultural for people, but something that really moves their lives. So I think that's the real difference I've seen.
And along those lines, because clearly your love and connection with people is really what continues to really fuel you and sustain you, what would you say to some new young men who perhaps are considering a similar path?
Well, I think, again, discernment is important too. Does God really want you to do this? And I can't say, I've never had an unhappy day. I've had difficult days in 40 years, but not an unhappy day. I never looked back and said, oh, gee, I wonder why I did this. No, it's been a joyful experience, a vocation, and I think that's how we can foster new vocations, because our priests have to appear joyful and be joyful in what they do. There are difficulties. There are going to be days you struggle, days that you might be, I would say, up against it.
Sure.
But not to take away the joy of the priesthood, which is really the thing that's so important to show, so that other people can be attracted.
I was going to say that's the last sort of question, but again, you just led right into it. Is really to really enjoy what you do is perhaps the best way to attract new people.
Sure. People want to follow happy people, not sad people.
Right. Well, you're certainly a good example of that, Bishop DiMarzio. We thank you so much for being with us on Currents here today.
Good to be here again.
Something we should all strive for. 40 years of happiness.
Yeah, never an unhappy day, my goodness.
It's great.
So that's got to be a record.
Stay with us. When we return, it's Bishop DiMarzio like you've never heard him as he gives us his eyewitness. Not so long ago, Bishop DiMarzio sat down with us to offer a very personal reflection about his life as a priest, and he revealed a side of himself most of us rarely get to see.
Well, this evening, as we conclude our look at religious vocations, we bring to you again one man's remembrances of a life of the priesthood. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is tonight's eyewitness.
To be a priest in today's world is no different than it's been over the centuries. The priest's job is to bring people to God. I guess the story of vocation starts as a very young boy. I live right across the street from the church. My confirmation, I got pushed ahead because I was in the 5th grade. I should have waited to the 7th grade, but since I knew my catechism so well, Sister said I could go ahead and get my confirmation in the 5th grade. So I was promoted at that time. So I even was excelling then in my understanding of Christian doctrine. It's hard to say if there was any one moment that convinced me that I should be a priest. And I think it was just a day-by-day affirmation that you had a vocation, and that's what God wanted you to do. The priest, his first Mass is a special time. It's something you never will forget. It was a significant time in my life, and I remember it as if it was yesterday, and it was 40 years ago now. It was the Feast of Corpus Christi, which was a wonderful day to have a first Mass, the Feast of the Body and Blood of Christ. And I had my Mass in Sacred Heart Cathedral, where I was ordained, and where I received my confirmation. So it was very special to me to be in the same parish and in the cathedral.
Thank you.
I've basically had in 40 years 10 different assignments. So that's a lot of moving around, believe me. To be transferred from one diocese to another is like being transferred from one parish to another, except that the priests have an option to say, yes, I think I'd like to think about it, or maybe I'm not sure I can do this. The bishops are the most obedient of priests. We have no choice whatsoever. We just say, aye, aye, sir, and we take off. So it was a little bit of a surprise when I was asked to come to Brooklyn. But it's been a very happy transfer, and I've taken to it, I think, as a duck to water. So I'm doing my best, and I'm paddling pretty fast. The sacramental life that the bishop can exercise is different from the priest, but it exists. Contact with people is constant, so it's at a different level, but it is the same work of the priest. The bishop's work is not that much different. The people become the sounding board. They become the inspiration. That's what priests live for, to serve their people. During this year of the priest that we celebrate now, the Holy Father's asked the people to appreciate what the priesthood is, at the same time to ask the priest to be more conscious of what their responsibilities are and fulfill them with greater love and devotion. I think people have to come to the aid of the priests, first of all by prayer, and then by support, and then maybe perhaps by taking on some of these external forces that are so negative. People really do have to speak out about how they see their church portrayed and how they see their priests portrayed. The body of Christ. To me, the Eucharist means union with Christ in a way that is not possible except through the Eucharist. It's not just a function that we perform as a priest, it is the center of our lives. 40 years, 365 days a year, how many Masses is that? It never really becomes routine. As you grow older, as you deepen your spiritual life, I think it becomes even more meaningful. Okay. I think everyone in their life would say, well, what if I didn't do this or I did something else? But it doesn't last long, because you see what you've accomplished and what you mean to people and the real meaning of the priesthood. So hopefully my ministry is one that deals with people. Maybe to say that he was the people's bishop was a wonderful epitaph, if I had a right one. So that would make me satisfied.
The people's bishop. I liked what he said there about the Eucharist, and it becomes more meaningful as time goes by.
Yeah,
that he says it never becomes routine.
Right.
You know, the meaning is just deepened over time.
Right, yeah, but yeah, more meaningful and not less. It's an amazing thing, because you think about 40 years of the priesthood. And he talked about, too, how, you know, the priesthood for a bishop is a little bit different than a parish priest or, you know, a teaching priest or whatever, but there is that contact with people, and he talks about that a lot, and he really enjoys, you can tell, getting in there with the people and working with the people and having that connection. So it's something that's very important to him, and something that I think he appreciates very much that he's still able to do.
Yeah, I mean, all the administrative duties, of course, and all of the other things that are more institutional that he has to deal with as a bishop that perhaps, you know, as a priest he may not, including having to do whatever he said, you know, aye, sir, I will go where you tell me to go.
You have no choice. When the Pope asks you to go somewhere, you have to do it if you're a bishop. Well, that's all for this edition of Currents. Remember, we're always online. CurrentsNY.net is our website. And if you have a comment, maybe a story idea, you can email us. Our email address is dropusaline, that's all one word, at CurrentsNY.net.
You can also check us out on Facebook and on Twitter as well. Until next time, I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Have a great night and a great weekend.